Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever eaten yogurt? I hope you have. But are you also maybe a psychiatrist? You study people's minds? You're in psychology? Well, today we're going to be looking at a chess player who recruited both of them. They literally recruited a psychiatrist and somebody ate yogurt. That's crazy. I know. So, this is the legendary 1978 World Championship between Kasparov and Korchnoi. So, we're going to be first looking at the lore, which happened in this tournament before the last game. This is game 32, indeed. So, first, let's start with the blueberry yogurt incident. During the game, a sealed cup of yogurt was handed over to Karpov by a match official. So, people from the Korchnoi team thought that this was some sort of like secret signal thing that they gave to him to indicate a move, and they actually filed a report against this incident. Secondly, there was Dr. Zukhar, a parapsychologist, who was sitting in the first row and simply staring at Korchnoi silently. So Korchnoi's team was like, "This is so weird. What are you doing, Karpov? I don't like this." So his psychic energy that he's emitting is somehow distracting him. So he eventually was moved to the last rows. But, like, I don't know what Karpov was thinking. Maybe this was a get back for the, um, you know, yogurt incident. And so then Korchnoi decided that I'm going to hire two people, two bizarre religious people who are convicted criminals to achieve deeper levels of focus through yogic meditation and spiritual support by doing stretches. I don't know why he hired two criminals to be on his team, but okay. And then there were, of course, like minor fights about chair heights, flags on the board, whether players were allowed to walk around for some reason too much, whether the clocks were fair, and even what kind of water was being served. Like, think about it. They were so paranoid that the court race team was like, "Oh, Karpov is getting a glass of water? That must mean they coded some sort of microchip and put it in the water." I don't know. This is Hans Niemann stuff, to be honest. So, and on top of that, there was 32 classical games, which is actually a bit crazy for a world championship. So we're going to be diving right into this game, which created all this hassle for this tournament. E4. I just forgot the whole intro thing. So we have Karpov is white, and we have Korchnoi is black. And this is actually the last game where Karpov was having a huge comeback, but because Korchnoi was having a huge comeback, but Karpov was actually able to hold his advantage and stay for the last game. E4, D6, D4, Knight F6. So we're starting with a transition to a system of the King's Indian defense. This can also be reached with D4, D6. Knight F6. Well, let's just put this position in instead of the E4 one. So D4, Knight F6, Knight to C3, D6, and D4. I like to view it in this way because in my mind, it's clear to me that this came out of a King's Indian and I need to play a King's Indian rather than, I don't know what happened to my mic, sorry. Rather than this kind of appeals more to like a perk. So I would rather see this move order, the D4 move order, rather than the E4 move order, because it's simply more clear to me that this came out of a King's Indian, like I said earlier, and it's probably easier for many of you. So when you see this kind of transposition, just think of the opening you're more familiar with. Knight to c3, g6, and this is just regular King's Indian stuff, nothing that exciting. If you don't know about the King's Indian, you should go read a book or look online, search up King's Indian defense, and you'll probably find like 20,000 things. Just look at the basic move orders and you'll probably be fine. Bishop to e2. I don't know why my computer is acting so weird. Okay, whatever. c5. So this is a typical idea in the King's Indian. Either rook to e8 or e5 is a popular idea, or c5, immediately striking at the center with this pawn, which benefits the bishop, is possible. In this case, c5 is much better because e5 is usually better for advancing in the center, but now it blocks the bishop, and actually, you risk some sharp variations. You need to know this move, and then like this. And I don't like to play this position, first of all, because the computer hates it. Wait, wait again. Okay, sorry about that. I meant this move. The computer is fine with it, but this is kind of scary. White's pieces are really active, and actually, when he wants, he can play like bishop to h6, and he's getting around your king. And in fact, if he lands knight to f3, it's practically a fatal blow in the gut. So we have c5, d5. This is a common idea. I won't like explain everything of the King's Indian, but white doesn't want to open up the center, of course, because he's just letting black get this expertly placed bishop with nothing blocking it. And also bishops are better in a closed position. I mean, open position. So d5, he's keeping this closed position kind of thing, like I mentioned earlier, and he is not getting this bishop let this bishop get that much activity that easily. Knight to a6. You can't develop the knight to d7 because you block this bishop. c6 you can't, so that means the only square is knight to a6. A common idea. I don't like this. I would rather just play knight to b to d7. Even though I block the bishop, it's more comfortable for me. But I also sometimes play knight to a6. The idea is knight to c7, sometimes e6, and sometimes knight to e8, where you can reroute the knight somewhere back onto f6 once this knight is gone. So we have bishop to f4, knight to c7. We continue with the plan. a4, b6. a4 is also usual common move. Not in this setup, it's not that common, but usually when the knight is on no, not here. Yeah. Usually when the knight is on the queen side, like on b4, or something. My mind's blanking out. But what you have to remember is that not I'll just explain in this case. In this case, white's idea is a5 and a6, and then advancing on the queen side with some sort of maneuvers like knight to a4, you know, c4, etc., etc. Maybe rook to b1, b4, and usually in the King's Indian, it's kind of a double-sided battle. Black is going on the king side, and white is full roll on the queen side because, as you notice, all of black's pieces are kind of playing on this king side kind of space, while all of white's pieces are aiming towards the queen side. So that's kind of how you remember which side I'm supposed to be attacking or defending. b6. I don't like this move. I don't know what it does either. I would rather not induce a move like a5, but In this case, it's probably fine because you have a discovery. Because the rook is attacked, you can do this. But in other cases, when the knight isn't here, or I have backup for my rook with, like, queen to d3, queen to c4, or something like that, or the rook comes here, etc., etc., I wouldn't want to play this move because I'm creating what's called a hook for my opponent. This is usually a big defect of the fianchetto, and that is how you say it. I will not stand any other response. So, in this case, white, it's not the best decision, but he can go full on with h4 and h5, which loses a pawn now, but later, and attack the structure to weaken it and actually open up the king with some ideas here. For example, if the knight goes to e8, let's say queen to d2, knight to e8, h4, um, bishop to d7, h5. And the idea is that if you capture, actually, watch what happens. Let's play king to h1, knight to f6. Let's just repeat moves. We're just playing stupid. And then just imagine he can't capture. And look what you did. The file is completely open. Imagine this can't capture, by the way. The bishop on d7. And you're actually just opening white's position. Because what happened here was that why white has a clear objective in this position of playing on the queen side is because these pieces are mainly blocked by other pieces on the king side. So it's no use to play against black and try to create a battle. So white is going to use his queen side open space and attack black. So if you're opening both sides of the board, but for you, you're keeping both sides closed, then actually, well, like you would think, white has a huge positional advantage. Instead, we have rook to e1. Don't ask me what that does. I mean, I would play queen to d2. And since I see that black isn't doing anything, I might even go straight for bishop to h6 and try to open up black's king and like knight to g5. Because black, with the fianchetto, has made his structure weaker and worse. But instead we have bishop to b7, rook to e1, bishop to b7. This makes sense, but again, the whole point of the King's Indian is to put your bishop, is to like attack white, and I don't see a lot of that. So I would probably then start to wait a bit because I can see that, okay, I'm not going anywhere with some sort of attack. I would maybe have to, if I really wanted to, play knight to e8 and e6 and try to put my queen on h5 via knight to g4 and queen to h4. But that means I have to make a lot of compromises. And this is why I like, again, to visualize myself playing the King's Indian rather than a sort of weird, odd perk with d4 kind of setup. And so, yeah, that's that. Bishop to b7. And now, as you notice, the bishop is also staring right into a brick wall where it, unlike its twin, is like not doing anything. And this is also another idea with the pushing of the pawn to negate any b6 bishop to b7 ideas. But Korchnoi doesn't really care, and he just goes for the weird development scheme. Bishop to c4, and also one like defect of this kind of approach is that white now has to deal with his light squared bishop also being horrible because most of his pawns are actually on light squares. Plus most of black's pawns, some of black's pawns are also on light squares, which makes it a bad combination for Karpov's bishop. So Karpov needs to make a move. See, he's white, and he can't let Korchnoi really do much, or even if he messes up, win. So he wants to remove his chances of attaining some sort of losable position, and he's gonna go straight for something. Well, he's bringing up something, of course. I would love to see queen to d2 and bishop to h6, but I think Karpov, for some reason, gave up a long time on this and would rather play more aggressively in the center. Right now, it's pretty hard to tell what he's gonna do. We have knight to h5. This is a pretty innovative move, opening with the bishop, though I would have liked to see it rather than this weird b6, bishop to b7 stuff if he was planning this earlier. So, like here, instead of b6, maybe you could play knight to h5. Just an idea, you know? And instead of all that stuff, maybe now you could play b6, and it's a bit more inconvenient for white. We have rook to, so we have knight to h5, bishop to g5. Bishop to e3 is also fine. Any move is fine, but this move is also a bit more innovative as it prevents any b6 ideas, which could be useful in the long run because it pins the pawn to the queen. We have knight to f6, bringing the knight right back. You don't have to necessarily do this. I perhaps would have kept my bishop open for one more and played a simple improving move like rook to e8 or rook to c8, or even maybe keeping this knight here for a bit and playing knight to e8. The engine thinks that you should probably get out of the pin, which is also a reasonable idea. So we have knight to f6. I don't adore this move. Queen to d3, putting the queen more aggressively instead of the queen to d2, which I still do prefer. I don't really care what Karpov does. So a6, queen to d3. Also, I don't get the point of it. Okay, you're making your bishop stronger. Good luck with that. Now, like, what are you gonna do? Maybe h4, h5. But your queen isn't doing much better than on the d2 square, which it would be, in my opinion, more active. We have a6, preparing this b5 break, which was important. Perhaps this was the idea why, because Karpov did not want to play like this, but in this position, you can just put your bishop back on f1. So actually, I don't think Korchnoi would have played it. Maybe this is just a response to seeing the bishop has to move back, where it is weaker. We have rook a to d1. Karpov doesn't really care because right now the move is pretty futile, so he has to power it up, which he does by rook to b8. This is a more indirect way of doing this. I would rather see queen to d7, but then you're having issues with e5, which I mentioned earlier. And now this is the idea of the moving the queen now. I don't know why he didn't play queen to d2 again, but he does it his way. So rook to b8, I don't like this move, but perhaps it is necessary to not allow e4. But in that case, maybe you would just hinder yourself a bit to strike this counterpunch. So maybe it is a trade, but Korchnoi does not want to risk anything and goes for a passive approach. h3, I would maybe strike with e4. I mean, this makes sense why Karpov is waiting, but he constantly has to be scanning whether this move is correct or not, whether this blow is the fatal one. Because if he misses this fatal blow, if he misses it, it's practically over. Like, let's say Black could potentially defend with, like, queen to d6 and rook to e8, then it's practically over for Karpov, since um Korchnoi is getting tons of counterplay, which is extremely annoying, and he might end up losing because of this isolated. It's not really isolated, but it doesn't have any close neighbors, so we'll just call it isolated. Pawn. He can't miss this fatal blow, so he has to simply play a waiting move like h3. And he's like, Korchnoi, okay? I love yogurt. I don't know if you love yogurt, but I need to wait until I deliver the blow with my yogurt. Knight to d7. So Korchnoi is pretty indecisive with his knight. He's like h5. Or do I want my knight on d7, where it grazes on grass and then goes to d5? He doesn't know. So we have knight to d7, and what I think is his idea is knight to e5, but of course I could be wrong, as I was many times earlier. Queen to e3, and Karpov is like, okay, I am done waiting. I do not care. And instead of queen to e3 here, I am going to be decisive and I am coming for you. I will play e4 in the future, latch on, and destroy your position. Bishop to a8. So Korchnoi like, okay, I want this plan back. I'll play b5, and your bishop, which is a major defender of your position, is going to be shut out. We have bishop to h6, and Karpov's like, okay, you do whatever you want with your little bishop on the queen side, and I don't really care, so I'm just gonna put my bishop here, and I'm gonna start attacking you. And what are you gonna do? You put all your pieces on the queen side for no reason. And Korchnoi like, no, not for no reason. He's like, yeah, for no reason. He's like, no, for no reason. And then bishop to f1. So Karpov is backing up the bishop, and he's like, okay, I don't see where is my fatal defender moved. I have perfect control of this diagonal, and since I've removed all of your hefty bishop that was defending your entire position, is gone. It's gone. Like, you have no hope. And I am coming down the queen side. I'm putting significant pressure on the queen side. But more than that, look at your king and my queen and all my other pieces. They are coming for your king. You are not going to survive. Question was like, I would bet that I can survive. And he's like, no. So basically, Korchnoi's idea is that he needs to trade off all his pieces. If he can trade off all his pieces and he survives, he gets a draw. But knight to f6, and Korchnoi is kind of actually struggling. This bishop is blocked. His pieces have nowhere to go from this. Yet, may I mention again, this knight to c6 move. And we have ab5, and knight to e2. ab5 is important because the knight doesn't no longer has to defend the substantial b5 pawn, a4 pawn, and the knight is going to come over here. And he's like, okay, you put every single piece of yours on the queen side. It's going to take a lot of time for you to put your pieces on the king side. So in the meantime, I'm going to get all my pieces on the king side and attack your lowly pieces. And knight to g3. Knight to f4 is also fine. The idea of bishop to b7, by the way, is bishop to c8, knight to g3, and now Karpov even has some ideas of sacrifice with knight to f5 check, but he doesn't go risky and plays the simpler a3. So Korchnoi is like, okay, then come and trade rooks with me. It's not that bad. You just lose a rook. It's like, no, I'm not gonna fall for your tricks. If I go trade with you, my attention is actually diverted, and you have enough time to regroup your pieces, while I have I have simply no time to attack. I need to regroup my rook. The rook is really the last essential piece. If Karpov is able to get his bishop, or better, his rook, into the attack, he simply wins. So instead we have c3. The idea is when Ka- Korchnoi plays this move, he no longer has rook to d4 or rook to b4. So Karpov is just playing a prophylactic move and taking care of any pawn nuances he has to take care of later. We have bishop to d3, and this is where we see the double-edged thing of this c3 move. And now there's a square on c2 where it snipes the rook. So now it's a better place to get the bishop in play rather than the rook. And we see queen to e8, e5. And Korchnoi like, okay, I really have nothing, so I have to barge forward with my queen and attempt to scare you somehow. Even though you're literally Karpov and I am Korchnoi and this is a world championship. So, e5. Karpov isn't scared, just pushing forward into Korchnoi's position. D e5, queen e5. Now Korchnoi's piece is pinned, and most of Karpov's pieces are now active. And in a few moves, Korchnoi will be completely destroyed. Knight c takes d5, taking the pawn, but a pawn for your life isn't such a good trade. So bishop takes b5, and he's like, okay, pawn for life, I'll just take a pawn for a pawn, and I'll take the life on the side. So rook to a7, knight to h4, and now there is a double check here, and the knight is closer to the king with ideas of queen to g5 and, various checks. But Korchnoi is employing his futile tactics to do something. Karpov's like, okay, I'm just gonna wait. You do what you want, but you really can't do anything. So I'm just gonna flex how good I am. Bishop to f3 actually almost wins a piece. Bishop to e6, c4, knight to b4, and he takes pawn. He's just flexing on Korchnoi. I have too many pieces. You don't have pieces. I win. And the rest of the game isn't, I feel like, that instructive. It's just Karpov winning all his pawns. And eventually, well, getting his attack in. The most important part of this game, as I skimmed through these last few moves, which you can see, is about how Karpov was able to build tension in the center, not release it, and then release it when Korchnoi is making questionable decisions, which happens in the middle game. As I said, rook to b8, knight to d7. These questionable decisions make it perfect for Karpov, who is slowly building his tension. So, hope you enjoyed the game. Like and subscribe. Check my other videos and see y'all later. Now, get out of here.